Christina, welcome to Entrepreneur Money Stories.
Thank you, Danielle. I am so excited to be here. You already know this, but I'm a big fan of this show, big listener of this show. I absolutely love you bring on. So I'm like over the moon excited to be a guest today on the show.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. It's hard to take compliments, so thank you.
Well, I'm just going to shower you with them, and then you must take them.
Well, let's just jump right in. I've been a client of yours for a few months now. Podcasting has been something that I have been in love with for a long time now. When I started my business 9 years ago, I was an accountant. And just like so many of our listeners, I had to figure out the rest of the business aspect. Now, I always feel very grateful that so much of my experience was working in the C-suite. So I was able to, some pieces came more natural to me than others. But there was a piece that I had no idea, which was marketing. However, I loved podcasts, and that was a major training and learning tool for me as I started my business and started to grow. I knew the power of having conversations, and it wasn't until coach that I had worked with, Nikki Rausch, had introduced me to the world of being a guest on other people's podcasts. So I've shouted out Nikki on the podcast before. She was somebody who introduced me to this strategy, and I really think that it has been the number one thing to transform our business here at Kickstart Accounting. However, so I don't think that this is a strategy that people think works, or how to even consider it. So what are some indicators for you that somebody is ready to even start thinking about being a guest on podcasts? And then where does your company come involved?
Absolutely. There are so many nuggets you said right there that I wanted to touch on for people, because I really, really think that this is a strategy is key, is what you just said, right? And that is not like, a lot of times people come up to me, I speak at an event, or maybe someone hears me on a podcast or something like that. And they're like, hey, yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, I've been on a couple podcasts, but like, it didn't really do anything, for my business. And I always have a couple follow-up questions to that. Danielle's nodding her head because I guarantee she's heard people say this exact same thing before. But
it takes more than a few people.
Thank you. That is number one. That is number one. I will always say that to them, which is like, okay, so when you say you've been on a few, like, what does that mean? Because for a lot of people, that does mean they've been on 2 or 3, right? And I'm here to tell you right now, that's not going to move the needle in your business. When we work with our clients, we work with them for a year, and we are guaranteeing that we're going to get them booked on at least 24 podcasts. And the reason that we have that number is not just an arbitrary number. It is because our clients by the end of that year really are seeing the momentum in their business, because they are showing up over and over and over again in front of these audiences. So the first thing that Danielle said is absolutely, I'll be like, how many, what do you mean by you've been on a couple? Because usually we need to up that by a lot. And then secondarily, I'll ask, were you in front of the right audience? And most of the time, the answer to that is no. A lot of the times they got asked to be on someone's show by a friend, by a former client. By the way, I'm all for that. Like, if that's something you want to do, go for it. It is great practice, but do not expect it to move the needle in your business if it isn't the ideal customers that you need to be getting in front of. Like for me, I'm coming on Danielle's show. Yeah, she's a client of mine. Like, she asked me to be on the show. I'm a fan of the show. I'm super jazzed, but I'm also on this show because it makes sense for me. The people that are listening to her show are people that could potentially be clients for me as well. And so I think that that's a really important distinction for people to kind of hear. It's like, this isn't just we're talking about going on a couple of podcasts and seeing a shift in your business. It's all about being really strategic with that work. I think to kind of go back to part 2 of your question is like, how do people know? A lot of it is knowing that, just like Danielle said, you're someone that likes to have conversations. You're someone that likes to get out there, talk about what it is that you do. To you, that doesn't really feel like work. Do you know what I mean?
This is my favorite job. Yeah, this is my favorite job.
Exactly. Like, it's like, oh, you mean I just get to go talk to people and like have a conversation? That's awesome. And I think that that's such a huge relief for people when they realize like, oh, I don't have to be writing all the time. I don't have to be doing videos all the time. I don't have to be doing these things. I can actually just have a conversation with someone, as a guest, or if you have your own show, but we're really focused on the guesting, at our agency, but doing that and then really realizing, and now I can turn this into a ton of content, right? I don't need to be creating all the time. I could be having a conversation and creating a lot of my content from there. So I think that that's kind of a huge piece for people as to when they'll start to kind of make that switch to guesting being a really big part of their marketing strategy.
So I want to share for everybody that I didn't realize the impact it was going to have when I first started podcasting. And we've been guesting since 2019, maybe even 2018. And those first several shows, I had no idea. Not that I had no idea what I was talking about, but I didn't know what people wanted to hear yet. I didn't know how to do the call to action. I didn't know how to be a podcasted guest yet. And although we knew who our ideal client was, we didn't really know where the listeners were quite yet. And so if you've tried a podcast here or there and it didn't work, like either did my first 5, 10. You know what I mean? Like I needed to find my voice and really figure out who am I talking to? What do the hosts ask? And then how do I deliver my answers that's going to be in a way to be digestible? So just because it didn't work doesn't mean that it's not going to work.
Absolutely.
Now, Christina, let me ask you, what made you start your agency? How did you get here?
How did I get here? I ask myself that regularly, as I think a lot of us as entrepreneurs ask ourselves regularly.
Great question.
How did I find myself in this spot? But for me, I've been in PR and marketing for almost 20 years at this point. And I have done all the traditional PR, the TV, the radio, the print, all this type of stuff, and while I find those things to be great, in my opinion, they're more of a ego boost and more of a credibility for you to be putting on your website. But when it comes to actually making you money, I believe that podcasts are the most effective form of publicity. And so I saw this happen in my own business. I had a business before this one. And when I started to guest on podcasts, it became night and day. Strategic podcasts. It was night and day for me. When I shifted to start this business, I want to do things the way that I think make the most sense. And for me, a big part of that was having a guarantee. And another big part of that was making sure people knew why I believed that this was the best way for them to market their business. I think people have a real thought about PR people that they are full of shit, really, and they're just blowing smoke and all this type of stuff. And I truly don't think that that's how PR should be or how it has to be, but I've seen it. I've seen it time and time again. And so when I started this agency, I just wanted to do it differently. And that's really where we've kind of grown from the ground up. At first, like probably a lot of your listeners, it was just me, doing it all on my own. And now I have a team as well that helps with our delivery.
I want to touch on money mindset and growing a team, but let's keep on talking about podcasts, and we're going to loop back around to that because I think that's a really, really important strategy for us to touch on before I let you go. In terms of podcasting, what makes somebody an ideal client or ideal candidate to start thinking about podcasting? Because so many of us are like, yeah, well, that worked for you, Danielle. Like that works for your industry, your business.
Mm-hmm.
And let's be clear, like I never really actually thought that this was going to work for accounting. So like, I think I turned a pretty odd niche into it. But for somebody who's telling themselves that story, what do you have to say to that person?
What do you think is the worst that can happen? What do you truly think is the worst that can happen? And that is a question I ask people a lot when they come to me with a lot of mindset stuff around, well, I don't know if this is for me. I don't know if this makes sense for me. What if I say something wrong? What if I get on there and people think I'm an idiot? What if, XYZ, XYZ, XYZ? Guys, I've heard it all. And my main response to that is truly, and not in a rude way, but like, what is the worst that you think could happen? And for a lot of people, again, like I said, they're kind of concerned about what other people think, right? They're concerned about what other people are going to think about them. And I'm here to say that absolutely can happen. People can have their feelings about you. There are probably people that are going to listen to this and be like, I do not like her, and that's okay.
And we're not for everybody. We don't have to be.
And I'm okay with that. I'm not looking for clients and stuff like that don't, believe in what I do and care about what I do and stuff like that. So I get that. But I guess I'm not really so much worried about that. And I hope that that's the mindset that other people can have, because I truly believe that the worst thing that can happen is you do not put yourself out there. Because if we do not put ourselves out there, our business will not grow. I talk to people time and time again who are like, oh, I know I'm not very visible. I need to post on social media more. No, you don't. Like, that is not what you need to be doing. Like, that is just helping your existing audience. You need to be getting in front of new audiences. And podcasts are probably the easiest way for you to be making that happen.
So, why would somebody want to hire an agency rather than doing this on their own? Because potentially you could pitch yourself to
Absolutely.
be on podcast. What is the benefit of working with somebody like yourself over doing it on your own?
Well,
And I
Danielle.
can like tell you the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask you your thoughts on it.
Yes, as my thoughts, I would love to have your input on it as well. But really, I think the main thing, so most people come to us in one of two spaces. One is they, like Danielle, they've been on podcasts before and they know that it works for them. They just simply do not have the time and they don't want to dedicate their team's time to doing this work. So they're like, hey, I already know that this is what I need to do. I want to work with you guys to make this happen. I literally just show up to the interviews, drop my amazing knowledge and we take it from there. Right. So that's why a lot of people work with us. A second
Can
reason,
I touch on that before
please do,
you keep going?
please do.
So we've been doing this for a long time, and I will say, although at some point, we could have done this on our own and brought this internally. One, I do think that there is an expertise to it
Oh,
that unless somebody has a lot of time to dedicate to learning, following up, understanding the industry, it's going to take you or somebody on your team
a
a
lot.
significant
Yeah.
amount of time, right? It's just like bookkeeping, where are you going to learn how to be a bookkeeper and learn how to be an accountant? Are you or
The
your
answer is
team
no.
going?
Yeah.
Right, right. The answer is no. And so we've tried over the years to say, all right, let's bring this back internal. I think we can do it. And then within 30 days, I'm like, no, God, not a good use of my time, not a good use of my team's time. We want to make sure that we have experts who, it's our brand. And I want to make sure that we have people representing our brand in the most meaningful way. And I'm actually not the best person to do that.
I love that you said that because thank you. But also because I think that this is an important point as a business owner. It's like we do kind of sometimes get this way where we're like, well, we can just do it. I could just do that. I can just figure out how to do that, whatever. I can have a team member do it. And then we try to do it. And then we're like, oh, no, and yeah, actually, I think this might be better if we did it with someone else. And I think that this is important to note. Like, I trust a bookkeeper because they've been doing bookkeeping and numbers for a long time. They have that expertise. I've been doing PR for a really long time. This is something that I feel really comfortable with and that I'm very confident in, right? So that's what Danielle, of course, there's parts of the service that she's wanting, as well, but it's also probably because she knows that I have a lot of expertise in this area as well. So I think that that's something really important to note. The other kind of area that we see people that come to us is people that have built a business on referrals. So they are people that they are just really damn good at what they do. They built a business on referrals, but those referrals are either drying up or they are not very consistent. And so they are also at that point where they're realizing, I need to get in front of new people. I need to get in front of new audiences. Like, I can't just be relying on referrals all the time and expecting people to be coming my way. And that's just not the way that most of our businesses work. And so that's when they really find themselves needing to get more visible. And this is one of those ways that they feel, just like Danielle or just like me, they feel really comfortable with speaking. They feel really comfortable with getting on the mic, talking with someone, and not really maybe having to dedicate a whole lot of time other than just showing up for the interviews.
Now, what really makes you guys unique is the messaging piece and the way that you work with your clients. Something that over the years that has been a struggle for me is that I'm an accountant, right? Like, sometimes there's only so many different ways that I can say so many different things. And it was really refreshing to have you and your team kind of step in, ask me a series of questions, and pull out new messaging, like new questions, new strategies that I hadn't thought of. And so I feel like the topics are all fresh because I'm not like, you're not here like, Danielle, can you give me 5 more points on that? Like, I think that's a very big differentiator, in my opinion, of what you and your firm do very differently.
Yeah. I think the messaging is one of the top. I mean, it helps our clients be more successful. When our clients are really clear on their messaging, then they feel a lot more confident when they go to do interviews. They feel much more like, I know what I'm going to be talking about, et cetera. I know that Danielle did a session with our expert Tanae. I did a session as well with our expert Tanae. And I, before almost every podcast interview, will go and review that messaging doc. Even though I've seen it so many times, even though I've talked through it so many times, I want to go and look at it and get that quick refresher on like, okay, what are those kind of main points that I want to be hitting on? And every single client loves that session. Every single client is so appreciative to have that because like you, they've probably been kind of just talking about the same thing over and over and over again. And they're ready to kind of get to a different level, maybe have some stories that they can have to back up what they're talking about, et cetera. And, I just know who we have helping us with that part is amazing. I'm a big believer in like, I can do messaging. I have a journalism degree. I've worked in PR for a long time, but there are people that are better at it. And I would rather have that person be the first people that my client meet with so that I can then take it from there. And we're going to make sure that our bookings, we're going to make sure that all that strategy is there then. That's what I'm overseeing. But I don't believe that I have to be like the great Oz or something who's doing every single part of the best offer that we can possibly have.
Let's touch on that because I think that's important. That's a mindset shift for business owners because as we're growing our businesses, it is quite literally about you at first, right? Like there's so many of our clients who have come into it because they were good at their craft. They're an awesome practitioner, right? And as we grow, we need to stay in our lane. And so we need to hire people around us who are better than us, who are the experts. And that includes in your business as well. So how did you know that it was time to bring on somebody who was a messaging expert rather than you doing it on your own?
I think this is a great question. And I truly think that it was after, and again, like all of us, our product has evolved over the years, right? So it's gotten
Of course.
better and better as we've gone along. And so at the beginning, I was doing all the messaging. And it wasn't like it was an issue or something like that. But I don't think that I nailed it like our expert that we have now. And I think that what really happened was I was realizing that some clients were really rising and some clients weren't rising as much when it came to their interviews, right? Some of them were really floundering. Some of them like weren't really quite sure what to be talking about, what they should be saying, et cetera. And I was like, all right, this need to be more crystal clear.
Have you heard yourself saying, I'm scared to invest money in my business because what if it doesn't come back? I don't know how much to pay myself, so I won't take a paycheck yet. I'm reinvesting in the business anyway. Or how about, I'm not going to spend any more money until I know exactly where my money is going. Well, let me tell you, you are not alone. In fact, we have heard all of these stories and more throughout the last 9 years at Kickstart Accounting Inc. And that is why we have created the Money Mindset Mastery Framework to finally unlock and overcome these stories, to finally feel confident in your financial decisions and pay yourself what you deserve. The first step to create a profitable and successful business is to first understand your money mindset. Find out your money mindset personality type by going to kickstartaccountinginc.com/quiz. I can't wait to hear what your money mindset type is. Talk to me about money mindset. So as you were growing your team, how did you keep your money mindset strong?
So I think that for me, when it comes to my money mindset, I have really, really strong boundaries with my time, meaning that I'm not going to be responding to things at all hours of the day. This is one of the reasons why I went into the work that I do is that podcasts aren't generally like super last minute. Like I'm not having to like field calls at like 10 p.m. on a Friday, just like
Yeah, good
what
point.
I have to do when I used to work in other types of PR. And that's not really the reality of podcasts, which is wonderful for me. And so really when it came to building my team, the first hire that I had was really based out of need. You know, it was like, I'm not working. I am not someone that's going to be working 80 hours a week. So I need to be bringing someone on that's going to be able to help and supplement me in that way. It's very interesting because we work off a guarantee. So at the beginning, it was very much the gal that I had hired. It was very much like I paid once the results were in. So I kind of went off of like that type of a model at first because I knew her and I knew that was her motivation there. That's like how she worked. But over time, it's just been more of a standard, our publicists and the other people that work with us are just paid out monthly. And then we just have like, our goals and making sure we're hitting our goals throughout the time.
How can someone keep their money mindset strong as they go through this transition, right? Because it's an investment when you start to work with somebody. So if this is, your first time exploring this strategy, it is an investment. And I believe in investments in our businesses, but how would you coach somebody through kind of that objection around time versus money and the money mindset as we, like I could see somebody like, all right, Christina, I know it's a guarantee, but good Lord, it's month 3. Where are they? Where's my clients coming in, knocking down my door?
So I think that this is a really, really great question because absolutely there are people that come to me that are like, can I just do 6 months? Can I just do a shorter time frame? Right? I don't know that I'm ready to commit for a whole year to you and your team and your service. Okay. And the thing that I really like to say to that is we've had the 6-month clients. We've had the 3-month clients. When I first started, 3 months was what I gave myself, not to book the amount that we have now by any means, but to do, a certain amount of bookings on behalf of those clients. And I just think about it now and I'm like, how did you even do that? Like, I seriously like don't even understand, but hey, that's what got us to where we are today. Right. And then we did 6 months. And the problem with a 6-month commitment or a 6 months contract in the work that we do is by the time we hit 6 months, sometimes only one of the interviews has aired, right? Like we would be at a point where just the timeline and the way that it kind of works to get everything going and to make bookings happen and then the recordings, and then them actually airing. By the time we were at that 6-month mark, the clients were like, okay, well, we're all done with our work, but like, I haven't seen any of the results yet, right?
It's true from a scheduling perspective too. Like you're getting the shows, but then your schedule as a business owner now has to go and line up with
Exactly.
the host. I mean, it takes time for sure.
Yeah. Yep. And we handle the scheduling as much as we can. But to your point, it could be where you're having a recording next week, or it could be 2 months down the road when your schedules align with a host, right? So that's what I'm saying, in that like we don't have control necessarily over that. But by giving ourselves a year and by getting our clients on more shows over the course of that year, the momentum at the end of the year that our clients are seeing is astronomical. And they're so happy because they're starting to see all these things come into fruition. People are coming into their funnels. New clients are booking discovery calls. Courses are selling, all this type of stuff. Whereas when we used to have a 6-month or a 3-month type thing, none of that was happening yet. Right. And so I think a huge mindset shift for me was like, what is the best for our client? What is going to give our client the absolute best results? Not just what they think makes the most sense. Right. And so that was a really big thing for me, is a lot of people think that PR should be really fast. It should be really quick. It should be something that they should be receiving results from right away. And there's a lot of like kind of coaching around that and what that actually looks like.
I think that's a really important, my dad always said growing up, patience is a virtue. And I still think I'm learning that.
I think we all are, especially in the online world.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, is there anything else I haven't asked you today that you think would be really helpful for somebody who's listening who might be on the fence on whether or not podcast guesting may or may not be right for them in their business?
I love this. And I think that I'm going to kind of take it back to the basics a little bit and talk about, expand a little bit on something you said earlier, which was just how, like, when you were getting started out, And I think a lot of us are this way, like the marketing kind of falls last, right? Like it becomes the least important thing in what we're doing. And I think that this is really important to understand the different types of marketing in our business and the focus, the reasons why we have them. So your marketing goes into 3 different categories: owned, earned, and paid. All right. So paid is, shocker, the things that you pay for, ads, etc. Great place to potentially bring in cold people that you can be upping, maybe into customers. Then there's owned. And those are all the things that you control. So your social media, your website, your e-newsletter. For Danielle, her podcast. Those are the things that are her owned marketing channels. And then there's earned. And that is where publicity falls in. And I think this is important for people to understand. No money is exchanged, okay, to be a guest on a podcast. If someone is charging you to be a guest on a podcast, you send them to me and I'm going to have a real conversation with them about it.
Okay? I've had people try.
That is not publicity. That is an ad. That is a whole different ballgame when that happens. I got a lot of thoughts on that I'm not going to go off on right now. But I think that it's important to recognize this earned media is getting in front of other people's audiences. It's providing value to get in front of someone else's audience. And a lot of people overlook that part of marketing. We really, especially as online entrepreneurs, focus on that owned because we have control. We have control of our own channels.
What's another example of that?
Yeah, I mean, truly anything, like our email, our social, if you have your own podcasts, like if you even have like an event, anything like that, that's all your owned marketing. That's all the stuff that you have control over, meaning you don't have control over like Facebook as an entity, but you have control over what you're putting out there.
Okay. And what's another example of the earned?
That's a great question. So that's really any type of publicity. So that could be podcasts. It could also be, maybe you get a quote in an article. Maybe you go on your local radio station, right? Like there's a lot of different examples of that, but publicity is earned media. Yeah, great question. Great question. And the only other thing that I'd want to drop in there is just building this, like, especially as we're heading into 2024, like building this into your 2024 plan and having that earned media be there. I personally have a visionary KPI, and that is that I'm going to get in front of a new audience at least one time a week. And I think that that's a really, really good goal for people to kind of have as they head into the new year. And by the way, that doesn't need to mean you're guesting on a podcast, although of course I think I'm biased and I think that that's a great way to do it. But that can also mean you go to an event, a local event. That can mean you go to coffee with somebody. That can mean you speak at a summit. That can mean you speak at a mastermind, right? Like that's all different kinds of ways that you can be doing that. But the point of it is getting out in front of other audiences over and over and over again and really talking about that messaging. And by the way, you become a client of ours, at least half of those get taken off the table right away because we're going to make sure you're showing up.
Yeah, I think that this is the power of setting an intention and a goal for the year. The act of budgeting, right? So to me, budgets are like the ultimate SMART goal. There's all this buzz around how to set SMART goals and how to set goals. Hello, people. Corporations have been doing it for years because budgets are the ultimate SMART goal. We need to set an intention for the year and then create the financials, the metrics around how to monitor for that. When you're thinking about new strategies like this, what is your intention for the year? If your intention is to grow and to show up in growth mode, this is an amazing strategy to look at. And then creating the tools, the budget to say, all right, here's how I'm going to plan for it so I can practice the patience with Christina and her team. But I know that I've built the budget, right? I know I have it built in and that I'm going to let the time take over to see what happens with that. But creating the budget is going to help you kind of set out the actual intention, the actual mapping for that expense. And then it gives us our, I always ask guests about their money mindset. But that's one of the best tools for our money mindset is setting a budget to say, all right, I am setting aside this money to work with a new strategy. And I'm going to lay out these dollars for this reinvestment back in my business. And then using the budget to monitor and track the progress over time. So just wanted to leave people with like, that is the ultimate way to be able to plan for this type of expense. I know when we looked at working with your team, that's exactly how we made that decision is we built a budget around it. We looked at our numbers and we're tracking the KPIs to monitor the success.
I love that. I love that. And I love it because of particularly this time of year, that's where we're seeing a lot of people. So we have people that we've talked to year long that are coming back to us right now and are like, okay, now I've done my budget for 2024. Now we're ready to be a client. Now we're ready to come on. We budgeted for this. We're ready to go. Right. And I think that that's such an important thing you just said is like, they might not have become clients right then when I spoke to them, but that was because they needed to think about it and they needed to make sure it fit in. But they're now at the point where they're like, okay, we tried we tried to do it ourselves. Like you were saying, it didn't happen. So now we know that we need to have this budgeted in there so that in 2024, you're just taking it on for us, right? Or you're just taking it on for me. So I think that I love that you just brought that point. It also made me be like, I need to work on my 2024 budget.
That's what you wrote down there. Oh, that's funny. All right, Christina, where can people learn more about you and stay in touch?
Absolutely. We'd love to have you we have a really fun interactive quiz at podcastpublicityquiz.com that really helps to kind of tell you what the next best step might be. Like that could be potentially applying to be like Danielle, one of our pitch broker services, or we also have like a DIY course as well. So some people like to go that route. So we have that there going on as well. You can also find me on Instagram at PublicityxChristina. And that's Christina with a CH.
All right. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, I asked for you to do one thing in return. I would love if you could like and subscribe and share this podcast episode with one other person who can use this information. I am looking forward to our podcast next week. We'll see you there.